Okay, the speaker this evening is Robert. Robert came to us before, 2013.
I know it was about 18 months ago.
Yeah, to talk about dolphins, and I think we all thoroughly enjoyed that. So we're looking forward to tonight's talk, which is slightly different, but I'm sure it'll be very informative.
Thank you, Aura.
You're welcome. Water for you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh,
Oh.
sorry, I forgot to get you water.
Well, this is all very informal, isn't it? I like this. I haven't given a talk to people sitting on couches before.
Would you like me to get your glass? Are you okay?
No, I'm fine. This is different. Excuse me. Just to sort of have an effect on the vibration in the room to start with. You've probably done all this before, nevertheless. I'd like us all to do 3 ohms. Can you join me in that?
Yeah.
Please, because it does have an effect on the vibration. Okay, nice deep breath in. One again. One more. Tell me, do you use that when you're meditating or before you go into a silent place? I tell you why I mention it, because recently I was talking to a friend and her sister was going through quite a bad patch, feeling low, consistently low, not wanting to get up in the mornings, just a tad short of depression, but really having to drag herself about the place, no energy at all, wonder what was wrong. There was no ordinary diagnosis from the doctors, and she doesn't mind connecting with alternative therapists of all kinds, and she connected with this gentleman who had some machinery which was connected to a microscope in such a way, I don't know the detail, but in such a way that you could actually watch and look at a sample of his client's blood on a slide under a microscope. And he took a sample of her blood in the consultation and put the slide under the microscope, and straight away you could see something was wrong, because all the red corpuscles in her blood were clumped, which is not good. They were all clumping in her blood, the red blood cells. And then, quite in the ordinary case of conversation, it occurred to me, she said, "Oh, well, I wonder what would happen if we said a few ohms." Just like that. And these corpuscles all separated and flowed on their way. I thought if ever you wanted to know the power of Om, that was it. And she wasn't even doing it the way we've just done it. It was just in the conversation. And you could watch it, she saw it. The clumps in her blood undid and flowed freely. I thought that was lovely. A real proof, if proof was needed, of the power of that particular vibration. So we should never ever forget that. And that really bears on my subject today. Because when Orly and I had our conversation not so long ago about this talk, she said, "Well, bless you, we so enjoyed your dolphin talk, we'd like you to come back. What can you talk about?" Well, to someone like me who's I've got plenty of the gift of gab, I thought, my goodness, what an opportunity. Anyway, what we arrived at was personal and universal transformation. Now that's quite a mouthful, and it's a heck of a subject. And not long afterwards, I actually saw that it could be narrowed down to something simpler in a way, which is 3 words. Transforming is remembering. That's what it is. In a nutshell, It's looking at, experiencing, going through sometimes processes that are necessary, sometimes it's instantaneous. But transformation is actually simply remembering not so much who we are. If we get caught up in who we are, then we're looking at the personality and how that is formed and what creates it and how we live by it every day. Yeah, we're familiar with that. It's more what we are. It's remembering what we are. Not just as a concept, not just as an intellectual idea, but as an experience. And what interests me, and I'll be asking later possibly, because I'm sure there's an immense amount of, shall we say, spiritual experience in this room right now, and I'd like to plumb into that later on. But just let's take that subject. Transforming is remembering. So what is it, therefore, that we've forgotten? Incidentally, before I go on, this is the kind of talk, the essence of which is energy. You don't have to remember, in fact I'd rather you didn't, remember or try to remember any specific from this talk. Or obviously it's your choice, but you don't have to even take notes or anything like that, because what we're talking about here and what is conveyed here is an energy. And what will happen is, with the kind of energy that we're talking about, you may well find that over the next days and weeks there will be reminders anyway. Life will produce its reminders of something that you might have heard or thought about or felt tonight. So you don't have to worry about trying to remember any specifics of what I say or make notes of them or anything at all. You will take with you what you need to take from this room when it's all over. It's an energetic thing. Okay? So that was worth mentioning, and it's very important. So, okay, we talk about transforming is remembering, which implies that what is it we've forgotten?
That we're God.
Exactly so. But it's interesting in this age, this place we're in, to just examine, throw out there all the things that make us forget, that contribute to us forgetting. I mean, I love the Wordsworth quote. I haven't got it in full, but William Wordsworth, in one of his poems, talks about us coming in trailing clouds of glory. I think that's beautiful, and I think it's absolutely accurate. And then we have necessarily to go through a process of forgetting. What does that mean? Well, in my experience, it means that when we come in, although we're not a clean slate, we are not, in a sense, totally innocent in terms of naivety. But when we do come in, we are innocent in terms of being open and vulnerable. That is clearly evident if you look at any newborn baby, and we've all been there. And at that stage, incidentally, you can actually trace it scientifically, because the dominant brain waves with a newborn child are those that later on we strive to reach in deep meditation. The same brain waves, only when we're a newborn, they are dominant. That's virtually all we are. The other brain waves that are to come are still much less by comparison. So there we are, open and vulnerable and taking things in like a sponge. Now clearly then what happens is a process of conditioning. A process of bringing in the methods and the techniques, the thoughts and the rationales, so that we may grow and live in society. That's just the way it is. It's nobody's fault, it's nobody's responsibility. At the moment, in this level of our evolution, we have to be that way. We can't survive, obviously, walking around with that degree of vulnerability, that degree of openness. Interesting though, just as a matter of interest, there are people, very occasionally, who do preserve that state. And they are becoming increasingly prevalent in literature. And you do see them occasionally on the media. And they're referred to often as autistics, as savants, who can just simply look at what for us would be a mass of information, and they've got it. They've still got that degree of openness. They can read a whole book. Well, they don't even read it, they just scan it, and they've got it. And they are the people who early on are diagnosed as being in a state which needs support. That's how they survive. But then they exhibit these amazing characteristics, which we all have at a certain stage in our development. But then the vast majority of us, that gets covered up, and we become what is acknowledged as, quote, normal, unquote. Has to be that way, otherwise we wouldn't survive in society as it is. However, the price we pay is what we come in with, trailing clouds of glory, necessarily gets covered over, as we are conditioned to live in the society that we live in. Another way of putting it is that excuse me, the right brain that we have, which is always, incidentally, still open to, if you like, nirvana, to the peace that passeth all understanding. The right brain we all have right now is open to that. But left brain takes over for most of the time. So we grow up relying on the rational, on the covering, on the survival techniques and methods we learn as we grow up. And what comes with that, of course, are all kinds of things that we take for granted in adulthood. And this is the crunch. We take for granted in adulthood as being who we are. That set of thoughts that makes us, we think, makes up the personality. Unfortunately, that brings with it things like what we do to survive, including judgments, an array and a whole army of thoughts of victimhood, of the blame game, all that stuff. There's so much that this contributes in its way to helping us survive, to defend itself, and thereby, we think, to defend us. Because what this wants, what left brain, what the rational mind wants more than anything, two things it lives by. And if we look at our lives deeply enough, we realise how much of our lives we actually follow its dictates. Two things it lives by: to be right and to survive. And it will do anything to enable you to be right and to survive. And when you think what that means, not only individually, when your point of view comes up against another point of view, or a collection of points of view, you've only got to look around. Let's take it to the universal from the individual for a moment, and look at what happens in science, in politics, internationally, nationally. All that you see all the time are different points of view, all doing this, and basically saying, I'm right. No, I'm right. Labour's got the answers. Conservatives have got the answers. Climate change people have got the answers. Non-climate change people have got the answers. Everybody trying to be right. All coming from basically this. Plus over the years, particularly in recent decades, we have become obsessed with the intellect, as though that has the answer to everything. As if we haven't learnt now, please, for hundreds of years, since the so-called age of reason. Where are the answers? Are we any happier? Is the quality of our lives any different, any better? We may have all the material trappings, yes. Amazing what this can also do. Let's not knock it for producing what it does on a material level. But when it comes to the quality of life, no, this is going to produce more and more trouble because of its aims to be right and to survive. That's what it exists for. Now the lovely thing is occasionally there's a breakthrough. Now this is what interests me, and you can answer this for me. The right brain, therein resides our connection to much more. As I said earlier, to bliss, to the peace that passeth all understanding, to the joy of life, the thrill merely of being alive. How we'd all like to live our lives every moment if we could. It's already there. It's already there. It's not something that has to be sought or looked for. And that's why I brought this. There are many points of reference, but this had quite a profound effect on me concerning what I've just said. This woman, Jill Bolte Taylor, an American revered for her place in the science of neuroanatomy. In other words, the anatomy of the brain and the nervous system and how it functions. And at the age of 37, she had a stroke, a vicious stroke. And this is the crunch, on examination, all the hemorrhaging, all the blood release in her brain was on the left side, all of it. So that all the left side functions virtually ceased. And for a while, she was living entirely in right brain. It's what kept her alive. And revealed then, absolutely, and this is a neuroscientist, how she found herself in this place where she couldn't add 2 + 2. At one stage at her bedside, her mother said, "Darling, tell me, what is 2 + 2? And she said, "What's a 2?" She had no recognition. That's the left brain stuff. It had gone completely. But what she did have, and what she writes about, is a sense of what I've been talking about. The amazing place she found herself in. Of not even recognising people who'd worked with her for years, all that stuff, but she was in bliss. Total peace and joy. And she had, at one stage, as of gradually, some of her left brain recognition started to come back. And gradually, she got to a point where she realised, I don't really want to go back to the way I was. I love it where I am, thank you very much. My words, not hers, but that's basically what that was the basis of her decision. She was very happy, thank you, living totally in right brain. And gradually, she reached the point, it was like, no, I must go on because I must tell people about this. And thus, she comes out with this. And you'll see her on YouTube as well. Jill Bolte Taylor. And obviously you can look at that, whatever. Take note of it afterwards. But I use that purely as an illustration that if ever there was proof that the right brain holds it for all of us, it's a presence of unity, whereas this exists in duality and separation, necessarily. We live in a world where we have to live, whether we like it or not, separate lives. So this will maintain that separation and the duality it requires, whereas this is all about unity. So we've forgotten that largely under the auspices and the dictatorship of this. Again, I stress, I'm not making anything wrong here. They each have their place for us while we're here in this material plane. But the lovely thing is, I think, and this is the basis of my talk, we're living in an age where increasingly these senses that I've talked about, these experiences that are in a way almost beyond words, actually do come through, even if it's only for an instant. Now, question for you. How many of you have had those glimpses of something beyond the normal mental functioning into a sense of unity, bliss, peace, that you couldn't even begin to explain, but it was there just for a split second? How many? Yes. Lovely. That's what we're talking about. And my belief is that we're living at a time when those moments will increase. They'll become more numerous, they'll become more intense, more ecstatic, just as Jill Bock Taylor discovered. And I'm sure you may have already felt it at times when you've had that moment. Oh, why can't it be like that all the time? Well, the point is, it is like that all the time. It's not as if you lose that capacity and pick it up again. It's always there. It's always present. Always waiting for what? For what? And this is where I like to come into generally looking at what is happening right now universally, and then addressing the person. We only have to look around, even if we accept the fact that the media, the news media and so on, are obsessed with sensationalism and will pick out all the negatives and all the awful things that are happening in the world and so on and so forth. And it's very easy to get sucked into that as current reality. Yeah, but it's also interesting to note the intensity, the danger that seems to be lurking. And okay, if we are living in an age of transformation, if something profound is happening, what's all this about? How many times have you heard from people, often in the public eye, highly intellectual people, and that might be part of the problem, but highly intellectual people who say, well, how can there be a God when all this is going on? All this awful stuff that's happening in the world, da-da-da-da-da. Well, I think, let's see if in fact what's happening when you take the broader view and apply it collectively and individually, that actually what's happening is a gift. It's a gift. Now, I'll come back to that in a moment. Where are we living? What are we living in at the moment? Now, it's interesting we use a word when we're trying to delve deeply beyond normal consciousness into the energies that really drive us. We use the word divine. I'm talking now as you would use the word with water divining, for example. What did we divine from what I just said? Or a water diviner is a good example, actually, because what does a water diviner do? He's looking for something which is way beyond the reach. He's looking for something at depth, which is out of sight, out of all the senses. And what's he doing? He's divining. Now, why I say that is we have access to all kinds of divination systems. And we know about those. I mean, heavens. You know, there are so many of them. And what they are, any system we like to use, is looking at symbols of what is. When we can't look directly at what we're looking for example, the subconscious mind, or what really drives us, what we are rather than who we are, we do take to symbology. We have to look at symbols, a divination system. Now, one that I like, and has always assisted me, and it's not the only one, there are hundreds of them, but the one that assists me is what I like to call astrolonomy, which is a combination of astrology and astronomy. Astrolonomy. And I like it because, not that I've got any particular desire to convert anyone to believing in astrology. A number of times people say to me, do you believe in astrology? What do we believe in? It's not a belief system. Nothing to believe in. No, you'll see what I mean when I talk about what it means that we're in this change from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. What it actually means can be traced initially astronomically. Now, it is a fact that about every 25,000 years, the axis of the Earth wobbles through a circle, a complete circle, 360 degrees, it wobbles. It takes about 25,000 years. And that's called the Great Year. And when we talk about the Earth being in a certain age, what we're talking about it being is in the age of the sign of the zodiac or constellation, which in any given moment the axis south to north of the Earth is pointing to in the stars. It started off astronomically because obviously then the constellations involved, which make up the band of stars which make the zodiac, the constellations as such vary in size, of course they do. But all we've done as a divination system with astrology is taken that and formalized it into 12 equal parts. But in each of those parts it is the constellation that is dominant in that part of the heavens that we say the Earth is in that age. So there is an astronomical basis for the change of the age. Yeah. Now you look at it astrologically, and we're talking about the wisdom of thousands of years here, and we're going from the age of that where the axis is pointed has been for 2,000 years, or approximately, pointing at Pisces on the zodiac, and now it's moving into Aquarius. Now I get lots of people saying, well, when does it happen, Robert? You know, is it this year, next year? Is it August? Is it June? You know, no, it's not like that. It's not a question of exactitude. It's like everything else in astrology and in many other things. The age, we're going through a point, and yes, there will be a point of exactitude, but there'll be several degrees either side where, when you're in that place, you take on the attributes of both sides. And that's where we are at the moment. The whole planet is where we are at the moment. So, really, we should be talking about this as the age of transition. Yeah, that's what we're in. It's transition from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius. Now, this for me is when it becomes interesting. I've studied astrology, I've worked as a professional astrologer, and it's been a passion of mine. Oh, for more years than I care to remember. But certain things I've learned which can apply here very particularly. The age of Pisces, obviously, as you know, the age of the fishes. And we've been largely acting, if you look at human history over the last 2,000 years, we've been largely acting automatically, unconsciously. Press a button, we come up with a given response. Stimulus, response. Stimulus, response. Very little choice involved. Think of a fish. I like the little story of the fish in the ocean. And the dolphin comes up to the fish and says, well, how do you like it here in the ocean? And the fish says, ocean? What ocean? That's where we've been for 2,000 years. Plus, one of the major attributes of the sign of Pisces is dependence. We've had about 2,000 years of dependence. Look at how the dogma of religions has gone. Instead of taking the masters that have undoubtedly visited the planet, and the master of the Piscean age was obviously Jesus, but instead of taking him as a man who became God realized, who became transformed, and the great lesson of which was, hey look, I'm only a man. If I can do this, you can too. Instead of doing that and embracing him as a man like me, as a person like us, we did put him up on a pedestal, as we do with anyone who shows the slightest inclination to be someone who knows. Put him on a pedestal, worship him. We can never be like that. He is the only Son of God. We're all sons and daughters of God. Anyway, without getting into any argument about rights and wrongs of Orthodox Christianity, I'm using that as an example of there's a master of each age. And when you look at what the stories around him were and are, how they relate to Pisces, it's also the sign of self-sacrifice. But largely the sign, I'm going to concentrate on the sign as a dependent sign. And like the fish in the ocean, we have lived as a species for 2,000 years always dependent. And out of that dependence becomes what? Victimhood. It's always someone else. It's the boss. It's the government. The people we depend on, whether they supported us or let us down. And there's the fish, unconscious of it, even its own emotions, because water, esoterically, is always symbol of the emotions, always. Now, come to Aquarius. What have we got now? Now we've got the water carrier. Instead of being totally unconscious of and controlled by and dependent on water as an environment, now we're in Aquarius, or moving into Aquarius. Aquarius is the water carrier. Now we've got the water in a jug on our shoulders. We can choose whether we use our emotions and the power that they carry to fructify or to destroy, because that's what water does. It can make the land fruitful, or it can flood and destroy. But we're moving into an age where the water is in a jug on our shoulders. We have control of it now. We're moving into control of our emotions. And to do that, that is the stuff of transformation. I've heard amazing stories about what transformation might look like. Extraordinary stuff out of, well, fantasy, shall we say. Right from, we're all going to be in the fourth dimension. We won't have a body at all. We'll just sort of float around, and relate at that level. And what was it I heard the other day about, only those who have a certain degree of sensitivity are going to survive. The rest will die. which reminded me of, is it the Jehovah's Witnesses who say you've got to be one of the 144,000 and you'll be saved and the rest will, oh, come on. But various stories, and we've all got our own ideas about them, all of which are valid. What I'm putting out there is we're talking about the stuff of transformation when we're talking about becoming the water carrier, about being in control of our emotions. And how do we get that? And this is the crunch. Detachment. The Lord Buddha was always going on about that, wasn't he? He's quite right. The answer to life is non-attachment. Jesus said the same thing, be in the world but not of it. All the real biggies knew what they were talking about. And it's something that, because we are here now, that we are ready to embrace. That's the point. In this age of transition, we are being made ready. We are ready to embrace non-attachment. Now, let's bring it down to the personal. So many people I've spoken to recently, and you can confirm whether this is true or not without going into detail in a moment. So many people I've spoken to recently, particularly those with any kind of awareness or sensitivity, in normal everyday terms, are going through a pretty bad time. They've either decided on a project or decided on a direction and it's going nowhere. They're blocked. Or they're confused and they don't know what's coming next. Or they're having all kinds of longings and desires that they thought they dealt with, which are in their face again. Having all kinds of emotions which they haven't had for years maybe. Sometimes for no apparent reason feeling either very angry or feeling very sad, full of grief. All these kinds of things are coming up now. They're always there, and they always come up to an extent, but I've never known it so general as it is right now. And I'd just like to ask again, either you or someone you know, is this true, what I just said?
Oh, yes.
Yeah? There you go. Now, let's make it more particular. In an age of transition, in an age of moving into what we are, not who we are, what we are, that is bound to happen. Why? Because the energies of transition on the planet are increasing, and the rate of that increase itself is increasing. It's getting more intense. The readiness of the energy that this planet is being drenched in by being between two ages is the energy that demands that anything that is still unresolved, anything that is still occult in the true sense of the word, which means simply hidden, anything that in that process of conditioning maybe that we've all been through has necessarily been covered over. Nobody's fault. Nobody's fault, that's how it happens, it has to be. But anything unresolved, any longings unfulfilled, any of those powerful emotions which we weren't able to express the first time around, this is the time when they are bound to emerge. You can't stop it. All the means of control we've had up to now, and this has developed lots of means of control. The left brain is brilliant at bringing in all kinds of controls. So that stuff stays out of sight, thank you very much. Particularly us Brits, it has to be said. We're very good at that. Very good at holding it down, aren't we? The old stiff upper lip. Don't you believe it's gone? It's still there. The mum, occasionally I see a mum in a supermarket, and a child is reaching out or doing something and she feels it shouldn't. And boy, is anything stamped on. Again, I'm not judging that. It's simply she's doing what we all do. We follow our conditioning, particularly in parenting. Did the same myself. I look back with regret to the fact that, oh my God, I parented my 2 children the same as I was parented. Oh my God, you know. That was before I got into all this stuff. But that is bound to happen. That material that we've chosen, or sometimes not even chosen, simply suppressed, held back, for very good reason. To do what? To survive. But now is a time when that cannot be resisted anymore. It must hit the surface. And this is the crunch, really. Transformation is such a huge subject that I want to home in, I want to focus on this particular aspect of it. Is that the easiest thing to do, and again, this is a function of left brain, the easiest thing to do when we start having these things coming up, or our lives appear to be going wrong or going nowhere, all the things we've mentioned, the confusion, the unbidden emotions, when all that happens, the greatest gift is to acknowledge that it's nobody's fault. If you get angry for no reason, that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. If you cry for no reason, if you feel deep grief for no reason, or you can't push ahead with something you thought you really wanted to do, you're blocked at every turn. The easiest thing to do is to blame yourselves and say, oh, that must be something wrong with me. You might not put that out there to your friends, to whatever, to whomever, but at some stage there's always this make wrong. I'll call it a make wrong. We blame ourselves. And again, us Brits are very good at it. It must be something wrong with me. And there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with any of us. This is the age of transition. This must happen, otherwise we're not going to become the water carrier. So let it be. Let that stuff come up, and judge not that ye be judged. And that applies to yourselves, to ourselves. It's the judgment that's the problem, not the emotion. There's nothing wrong with emotion. Things like anger and grief and whatever are referred to as negative emotions. I utterly reject that. Utterly. In some countries, what we would regard as a negative emotion is regarded as a plus. For example, look at the word, emotion. Energy in motion. All an emotion wants to do is flow through. In other words, allow it its life. The problems start when we put a block on it and we don't let it flow through. And how do we do that? By judging it. I shouldn't feel this way. Look at my friends, right? Look at these people walking down the road. Look at him doing what he does on the television or whatever. They're fine. Don't you believe it? Don't you believe it? This is happening to everyone. Don't be sucked in to the world of appearances. Our conditioning, so very good, we can keep up appearances till the day we die. That's what the conditioning is all about. We can keep up that mask, but it's got nothing to do with what we are, with the reality that is trying to bring us back to balance, to wholeness, to transform us. We are being transformed. There are many disciplines and books and groups and seminars that are eager to put out and make money from putting out that this is what you need to do to be transformed. You've got to do these exercises and you've got to meditate in this way and you've got to do your affirmations to be transformed. You've got to do that. rubbish. Absolute nonsense. You don't have to do anything to be transformed. Nothing at all, except live your lives, and when you can, see it from a detached point of view. And we're learners. We're in transition. We're learners. We're little children. Don't beat yourself up equally if you don't do this for most of the day. But even if you did it for a little bit, at a little time, a small proportion of the time, just to let go. That's all you have to do. Just let go all those judgments of yourself. We've all got to do it. Judgment of ourselves that we so easily slip into. Notice that you do that. You won't stop. This will judge. This will come in. It will make the judgment. But the energy of this is that you can actually sit back and see that mind of yours saying, oh, you shouldn't feel like that. No, it's all right. I'm okay with that. I feel like crying. On your bike. And you can do that with your own mind. Osho. Do you know who Osho is? Well, some of you do. He used to be known as Bhagwan Rajneesh. In the 70s and 80s, he was a spiritual teacher from India who, over the years, developed an enormous following right across the world. Very wise man. And one of the things he said was, meditation is all about creating a gap between you and your mind. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Your mind will continue to function. Like people say to me when I've taken meditation classes, oh, I've always wanted to do that, Robert, but I can't meditate. The moment I sit down and go quiet, my mind just goes off on tomorrow's shopping or last night's TV programme. And I always say, brilliant. Of course it will. That's its job. It'll do anything it can to take you away from the moment. Because transformation, what we're talking about, takes, as we know, when you put your hands up a moment ago, those of you who've had an experience of what is beyond, it happens in an instant, in a moment. It's not something you plan for, not something you work towards. You could be walking down the street, you could be washing up at home, boing! And then it's gone. But it happens in the moment. And your brain, your left brain, your survival mind, knows that it happens in the moment. So what does it do? It tries to take you off into the future or the past. That's where it functions. And so when you sit down to meditate, of course it's going to drag you off into the future or the past. Again, don't judge yourselves or it. Just notice it. The first stage of detachment from all this material is you become the observer. And the first thing you observe is your own mind. So when you sit and meditate, and that happens, it might not be meditation, you might just be sitting quietly, and off your mind goes, future or past. Just observe it. And the trouble is, we identify with it. That's the problem. We have got used over centuries to identifying with those thoughts as being who we are. But as I've stressed, this is a time of moving into what you are, rather than who you are. And that's the identification that's the problem. And this is where things like meditation can help enormously, because it starts to create that gap that I mentioned. So you no longer identify with that great myriad of thoughts that this machinery creates and will go on creating. That's its job. But you don't have to identify with them, I should say. That's only a part of who you are. It's like a noisome little brother. You know, like, metaphorically put it out on your shoulder. Okay, I heard you. Now, if you don't mind, I'm coming back into the moment. And then it'll take you off on another chain of thoughts. And sooner or later you notice, oh my goodness, come back to the moment You keep doing that, and the chains of thought before you become aware get less and less and less. But don't beat yourself up for identifying with those left brain thoughts in the future and the past, because, oh boy, that's been going on for centuries. That's what we're steeped in, and that is what this age of transformation, this age of transition, is about moving away from, becoming detached from, and just watching it. So I say again, when it appears that things are going, quote, wrong, unquote, with your life in whatever region, internal or external, the real message I want to get across today is, do not judge yourselves. At this time, it is bound to happen, and there's nothing wrong going on with you or anybody else. So what looks like a series of crises, be they individual or national and international, it has to happen. It's a catharsis. It must come up. It's nobody's fault. You are not at fault. On the contrary, you are here. You're alive at this time. So at some stage in the deep and distant past, who knows how many lives ago, you said, actually, I'd like to be there at that time. I see the opportunities it presents for finally offloading this load of fear and guilt I've been carrying for 2,000 years. So at some level, we've all chosen to be here at this time. That's why I come back to what I started with. This time and the energies that we're in, it's a gift. It may not look like it by normal standards. It can look like a disaster or a series of disasters, but it's a gift because there's a huge clear up going on. The energy demands it. And if you stick with it without judging yourself, because when you do judge yourself, or at least if you feel the judgment coming up, just acknowledge it. Well, there you go again. Yep. Well, this is fine. I feel like crying right now, or I feel like beating up a cushion right now, or I feel like shouting to the rooftops right now. So you just carry on. Yes, I know. Oh, I shouldn't do that, should I? No. Actually, that's your idea. That's not mine. That's not who I am anymore. I'm bigger than you. You are my servant, not my master. That's what we need to say to our conditioned mind. You are my servant, not my master. It's been our masters for too long. And it's time to remember what we are. Enough.
That was wonderful.
It's in our hands. And ultimately, that's what transformation is. Life just goes on the way it did before. But what changes is the way we hold it. And that is the difference between being in torment and being in bliss. Old saying. Zen saying, talking to an old man by the side of the road, chopping wood, carrying water, who is acknowledged as being an enlightened man. What did you do before you were enlightened? Chopped wood and carried water. Now you are enlightened. What are you doing? Chopping wood and carrying water. That's it. It will still carry on. When I say there's nothing to do, that doesn't mean we all sit on our backsides. No, you're carrying on with your lives. It's essential that we all do that. However, it's how we hold that. From here on in. Without the judgment, without being the servant of this. glorious. You came in trailing clouds of glory. They haven't gone away. They haven't gone away. They're still there. They've just, for a while, temporarily forgotten that they're there. Please.
Anybody got any questions?
What do you think that scientists now, they're hoping that we will go and live on Mars or something? That we'll slowly go out into into this, first the solar, our solar system, and then out into the universe. And they're developing the science to go so that we can go out there, but physically, I suppose.
Well, indeed. I mean, that may well happen.
In the aquarium.
Indeed. Yes, that may well happen. And I still ask the question, when we're doing that, however wonderful the technicalia is, when we land on Mars and set up colonies, will we be any different? Will we be any different?
We'll have to. We will slowly be changing, I think, to that environment. We'll change to that.
Well, indeed. Yeah. The age of Aquarius will, like it or not, take over wherever we are, on Mars or still on the Earth. It must happen.
And also they're developing all this, people want to live longer and live forever. No? They're developing all sorts of technologies, and somebody said in the future we will be more like a machine.
Oh yes.
Living more like a
I know what you mean. I remember.
Like, electricity.
Yes.
And we won't need food anymore. The electricity.
How awful.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. You've reminded me of something I looked at when I was researching this today. You know that lovely illustration of human evolution from sort of chimpanzee-like,
Oh yes.
and starts off one side of the page like this, then it's a little bit more upright,
Yeah.
and then walking a bit more upright, until eventually there's, as we are now, striding out.
Yeah.
I saw one today, bearing in mind what you've just said, that absolutely horrified me, because in one illustration there was another one after that final man, that naked man walking out like this. There was another man in front of him that was totally metallic,
Yeah.
totally robotic. And I recoiled in horror. I thought, actually it's raised, I'm glad that's come up, because that's something else that this has tended to produce. An extraordinary arrogance in our place in the scheme of things, in our place in evolution. And I like that illustration. And of course it ends up with a modern man, Homo sapiens, striding out like this, as if this is the crowning achievement. I utterly reject that. When you look at the way humanity behaves as a whole, and to each other, as I say, in the grip of this, but not even realising they're in the grip of this, the lesser part of themselves. And we have the arrogance to feel we've reached the peak of evolution. Oh, come on. In my view, that man striding out like that is round about the middle somewhere. There's the apes down there. Homo sapiens, you've got Homo erectus, Homo habilis down here, becoming erect, and then Homo sapiens, and he's just striding out like this. Now, Just imagine for a moment, there's another one further along that's going, and then one further along, the man is naked, going. And then finally it's, oh, you know, that's my body language, but you get the point. There's a lot more stages. And frankly, no way I can talk with any authority about this, but my intuitive feeling is that Homo sapiens is actually coming to an end. And I think there are already examples of the next species of Homo, whatever you like to call it. There are examples already on the planet. There are lots of children have been born over the last 20 years who are exhibiting what we would consider advanced sensitivities, mental acuity, way beyond what we've got, and they've got them from about the age of 5 on, you know, whatever. And they've been being born for about 20 odd years now. And now they're coming into adulthood, these folks. And of course, as we know, a lot of them are totally misunderstood, so that they are diagnosed as having an illness. They're ADHD, you know, or they're autistic, or they're this, or they're that. Only because, again, this, to make ourselves safe, we have to put them, as a society, we like to put them in a box. Oh, well, he's autistic. Or she's a savant. Or whatever. But diagnosable. Something's wrong. No, nothing's wrong. We should be sitting, watching, observing, listening those children as they grow and taking note. This is the next species of human. Wake up. Homo, whatever it will be. But Homo sapiens has had its day. That's my view. No way of proving it, obviously.
We're supposed to be becoming superhuman.
Sorry?
We're supposed to be becoming superhumans. That's what the next stage is.
Indeed. But there again, why super? Why super? I would say, fine, I accept that, but I would rather say we're becoming more human. Same difference.
Beings instead of doings.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Human beings rather than doings, exactly so. Doesn't mean to say we don't do, but we do from a different place.
From a heart sense.
Yes, yes. It's becoming heart people rather than head people. And the difference is, well, chalk and cheese. As we know, when we've had those moments of being a heart person that you shared earlier on when you put your hands up. So we know it. You see what I mean? We know it already. We're already there. You must be, otherwise you wouldn't have been able to experience it even as a glimpse. So we're there already. All we have to do is allow. In fact, I'll go further. The more we, as some disciplines would have you believe, the more we seek transformation, guess what? The more it will recede. Because the seeking will get in the way. The seeking comes from the belief that there's something to achieve, and that is also a left brain thing, which is deeply involved in a journey from A to B, and to succeed there you've got to do this, this, this and this and this, and there's a sense of achieving. Yeah, so we are again conditioned, yeah, sure, to go out into the world and do, but when it comes to the spiritual things, and particularly this area, it's much more passive. I like the concept of when we pray, more often than not, we're asking for something. You know, whatever it might be asking for it for someone else. More straight to your elbow. Might be asking for something for yourself. When we meditate, we listen. Ask in prayer, but in meditation, shut up. and listen. It's passive. And that is what will help to allow this process that I'm talking about, which is happening. And then transformation can be either instantaneous, a recognition even for a moment of the what we are that I've talked about, or if it's easier to absorb it as a process, it's a process of separating you from your mind, detaching from your mind. And that I can see it in myself as a process, a gradual process of moving away from the dictatorship of the conditioned mind and demoting it, not destroying it, not killing it, simply demoting it to the place of a servant rather than a master. Now that I can see as a process, because in terms of time, and we live in a time-space system, you get a glimpse of that at a time, and then the glimpses get longer and longer. So either way, it's still transformation. And when it's through and we're in the age of Aquarius, I don't think we can even imagine what it would be like to live 24 hours a day in that space. Well, we can imagine, of course we can. We can imagine. But for sure, thinking of Aquarius again, that marvellous position of being able to be in control of our emotions. That doesn't mean suppressing them. Control is not suppression. Control is knowing what to do with them. When to fructify, when to destroy, what to do with them. And standing upright. The prospect is amazing. All we have to do is allow it without judgment of that catharsis that must happen as the rebalancing takes place.
Do you believe in the reincarnation of an individual from one life to the next and karmic debts from previous lives? What would your stance be on that?
Absolutely. Totally with it.
I mean, some religions do believe that, and other religions like Christianity and Islam don't. So what? I just wonder what your idea.
Well, I'm not sure about that, because as ye sow, so shall ye reap. Is that not the law of karma? Does that not appear in Christian teachings? If this is
Yeah,
my
I
answer.
think that means that
Yeah.
when a person's born, I don't think it's really referring, or a priest or something would say from a, you wouldn't be talking about previous lives, would it?
But early Christianity did believe in
Absolutely.
reincarnation.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, a priest might not even want to acknowledge reincarnation exists. But for me, unquestionably it does. I mean, again, like so many things at this level, it's a paradox. I often am asked, what about reincarnation? Do you believe in reincarnation? And the proper answer, which I always give, is yes and no. And they're both true. Let me explain. Right now, in all of creation, what's your name?
John.
John. In all of creation, from the beginning to now and forever in the future, there will never, ever be another John. As you are now, sitting there with your mind, your emotions, your ideas, all the things we've discussed going on, there will never be another John. However, that's the no. The yes is the consciousness that drives John, the being that we've talked about, that is behind all things. That has brought this John into being this time around. That consciousness, the one that's aware of lessons to be learned, karma to be paid, that consciousness, you bet your life it reincarnates. So, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The truth for me is yes and no, depending on entirely how you look at an individual and what that individual is composed of. Reincarnation is, for me, in my life, proven. Absolutely proven. I can relate to what I brought with me this time around and why I brought it with me. Why I am here in this form and doing what I'm doing. I can relate to former lives that I've lived in detail.
Do you think you have to be hypnotised and taken back?
Well, that's one way, yes. It's not the only way, but yes, you can do it with hypnosis, by all means. But regression to former lives is easy. It's not difficult.
The silver kid.
It's not,
How would you do it?
it's not,
Has somebody got this? Sorry about this. Is it yours? Somebody.
Sorry.
sorry, where were we? Say again.
You,
That's last.
talk
We
about other methods of
Oh, the methods, yes.
realising past
Yes,
episodes
I-
of hypnosis.
Right. I can only recount my life. Yes, hypnosis, by all means. I've done that. But also, simply, I can think of 2 or 3 different visualization techniques where, again, providing you've got into the right state, or not the right state, but a state of relaxation, a state of peace, then there are various visualization techniques that can take you into, and have taken me into, experiences that have been absolutely real. I'll give you an example. For a while I was into, I'll call it now conscious connected breathing, because that's what it is. At the time, back in the late 70s through the 80s, it was called rebirthing. Yeah? And all in the interest at the time of me healing myself, me getting more knowledge of who I was, what made me the way I was. And I remember in one session in particular, there was a session that I was the client and the therapist was facilitating me with a particular breathing technique, which in a sense over-oxygenated me. I was lying on the deck. And the session was an hour. And I was breathing away, and I'd had sessions before. I wasn't in the least bit frightened. I'd been through some interesting things with it. And nothing was happening. You know, and the whole idea was the facilitator, as a good hypnotist, for example, is the same thing, is not meant to lead you into anything, simply into a state of relaxation. All she was doing was guiding me in my breath. That's all she was doing, keeping me breathing in a certain way. And the time went on, and I'm breathing away, and I'm still there, totally there in the room. Nothing's happening. No experience particularly is coming to me. And then literally in the last 5 minutes, because she was giving me clues or whatever, I was getting clues from somewhere. In the last 5 minutes, I suddenly flipped. And I wasn't in that room, and I wasn't on the floor. I say that. The lovely thing about that technique, you always sort of keep a toe in this reality. So I wasn't going psychotic or anything like that and moving off into another reality. No, but the point of this is, in those last 5 minutes, and very rapidly, I was in the body of a young woman in medieval times. The castle that I was in, and I was a member of the owning family, a baronial family, and the castle was under siege. And the besiegers had got in past the first defences, and the last area of defence was the keep, the circular keep, in the middle of the castle. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified. The besiegers were swarming everywhere. I went upstairs, I remember distinctly, the stairs ran up as a spiral around the inside of the outer wall to the next story, the next floor. And this floor wasn't complete. It had, shall I say, a balcony around the whole of it, and then 2 cross, what would you call them? Not corridors, they weren't corridors, but 2 cross pieces of floor, you know? And I was being chased around this wall. And the guy behind me wasn't gaining on me, but one of his colleagues had gone round the other side, and he'd come across one of these cross pieces, across the gap in the middle, to intercept me. He caught me, and I picked up that was my only defence. I picked up a stool, a little so detailed, three-cornered wooden stool, as some kind of defence, and held it in front of myself. And this guy who intercepted me pushed his sword right through the lock and killed me. Boom. Now, no one will ever convince me that was not a former life, because it was so vivid. I was there. It wasn't some imagining, I wasn't under some drug, it wasn't a fantasy. Every detail was there. And the lovely thing is, of course, when you do that, yes, you feel the emotions, but you don't feel any of the material pain that you would feel, obviously, as a sword going through you or anything of that kind. I've noticed that with several similar regressions I've done, that you don't get the pain of death or the material pain or hurt. What you do tend to feel, though, are the emotions. And in my view, on every occasion, what the purpose served was simply to allow me, in this case, to feel the emotion. Because I've never had that since. It's never occurred again. It's a bit like a dream. You know, if you have a significant dream, if it's one that keeps coming back, hello, there's something you haven't allowed yourself to experience. And the dream, the subconscious is trying to tell you, hey, take notice. Oi, you need to take. Before I did rebirthing all those years ago, I had a recurring dream for years, where in the middle of the dream, I went into a room, big as this to start with, absolutely driven to, I had to go through the door in the corner. So I'd go through the door in the corner in the dream, and I'd be in a slightly smaller room. And there's a door in that corner. And I had to go through it. And this went on, many times, until I was too big for the room. And the door, there's no way I'm going to get through that door, and I wake up. I had that dream for years, until I re-experienced my own birth for the first time. Which again, is not difficult to do. Not a case of conscious memory, no, this is a case of holistic memory. Of course we don't remember with conscious memory such things, but I'm sure you know about cell memory. The body has a memory, which is profound and never forgets anything. Yeah, that's where it comes from. And once after the first experience I had of going through my own birth again, start to finish, with everything, all the trauma, all the feelings, never had the dream again. And what a perfect representation of birth. The womb's closing in on you. You know you've got to go somewhere, and it's getting smaller and smaller. Yeah! You know, we've all been through it, but that was my dream. And once I went through my birth again, boom, never had the dream again.
Was that from conscious breathing again?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, actually, it was at the very beginning of rebirthing, late 70s. So it was at that time, it was part breathing and part actual physical facilitation on the floor with people with cushions simulating the womb and so on.
Right.
That was the first one. But then it became simply a breathing technique. Now there, folks, I have loved this. This is part of my transformation, I have to tell you. I need to get in touch with what I am too, as many times as I can. I will bring it to an end. Thank you so much.